Hey guys, so today in this video I'm going to be talking about the current framework that is not really working very well, and the framework that we should have like going forward, at least uh, at least from my perspective. So the first one is the that I'm going to go through is the current framework. So the current framework, I'm doing it based off of the framework of balance versus change, and then freedom, justice, balance, mental, and physical. So if you look at our current society, the freedom aspect is completely maxed out. So people have a ton of freedom, and the justice aspect is tuned way down. So there is like a sort of, law, there's laws, but it's not very egalitarian, so a lot of the laws are completely biased in favor of whoever can buy the courts and the lawyers, etc., and who can make the laws, who can um, lobby the government, etc., and the police and the soldiers, the militaries. So there's those two. Then you have the balance, which is a complete imbalance, which is shown by the deterioration of nature and the ecosystem, and the fact that we're changing our ecosystem so quickly that it's not able to stabilize, which is shown by the fact that our ecological footprint is 1.7 times that of Earth, meaning that the Earth is 1.7 times slower than it should be to not than it should be, than our rate of changing it. So we change it with our emissions, with our, pollution in general, and our destruction of the nature, so cutting down trees and etc. And so the rate of trees growing back, the rate of, now of course 1.7, like the ecological footprint, I think that's like I think technically it's it definitely is an average. I'm not sure exactly, how they calculate that average. Um, but I know some of the factors like are included, like essentially the main idea of it is how much land would you need to sustain you. That's like the main idea, and then they see how quickly the land can recuperate per person, and that's like how they average it out. Like certain countries have below one ecological footprint, or like they basically would need they would need less than one Earth to sustain the world if everyone lived like those countries. But other countries have way higher ones, like 4 or 5, and if you average it out, it goes down to 1.7. But anyway, that just goes to show the imbalance in our society. And like I was saying earlier, in different videos, that you want, for balance, it's all about recycling. You want to cycle back circularity to the old state of, it doesn't have to be like always completely old, but it has to be whatever matters, the needs, the necessary parts of the ecosystem that need to stay the same way because of evolution. Those would need to constantly be cycled through, aka balanced, because otherwise the balance, the state of things, the system is just going to get further and further away from what it used to be until it's completely uninhabitable, which is of course, pretty logical. Then you have the mental aspect. So if you look at our society, there's the problem of bad education, and there's also the problem of materialism and more like instinctual nature. So people are just like, oh, I want to buy this, I want to buy that. They don't think about the consequences. There's a lack of, like short-sightedness. So there is short-sightedness, lack of long-term thinking about the consequences. Also, the education system is very robotic, so it's not like it's not like it's completely horrible. Like, of course, there's tons of schools that are very high level, and they're very good at different tasks, at like teaching, different topics and such. The problem is that first off, it's like the average person is, there's a lot of lack of education in many countries. And also, even in the ones where they do have it, the average education is pretty bad, or it's just super robotic, and that's the problem. It's also super expensive. So there's all these almost, it's like, yeah, it's like they don't want people to be educated because it's expensive, etc. And it's robotic. You don't even get to choose how you want to educate yourself. Of course, you can educate yourself just freely, but that's again the problem. If you look at society, there's a ton of people who choose to be more materialistic, right? Rather than intellectualistic and trying to just, appreciate knowledge and information and ideas and thoughts. Just like imagination, yeah. So there's that, and then there's the physical aspect, which the way I see is like our society is very dependent on each other, right? That's specialization. So people are specialized and they lack survival skills, and so this means people are very dependent on each other. We're also sedentary, for the simple reason that when we're sedentary, we get our efficiency and we can specialize. It's hard to specialize if you're always on the move. We used to be nomadic as hunter gatherers, but now we're not. And so, yeah, and of course, one interesting fact is that our ancestors, the hunter gatherers, didn't have slaves until they started being more sedentary. So once they started being sedentary, even when they were hunter gatherers, they would start having slaves, but only when they were sedentary, because it doesn't make really, it's really hard to have slaves when you're constantly moving around, and it's easier for the slaves to escape. It's the efficiency is not there. It's much harder to get the efficiency out of it. If you're just trying to survive, right? Then what's the point of having this like a slave that you're just going to feed them anyways? Like, it doesn't really make sense. But once as they started, building those civilizations, that's when they started having slaves. Even if they were hunter-gatherer civilizations, eventually they started finding reasons to have slaves, and it was like a status symbol, etc. But yeah, like back then, when they were just nomadic hunter-gatherers, slavery didn't really have much of a logical purpose to it, because it didn't make sense. It was just, you'd rather just take care of yourself and just learn to survive and get by. That's what people were focused on. They weren't focused on making fancy lifestyles and inequality and such. But when there's sedentariness, then you have inequality, and then when you have inequality, then slavery is easier for it to come about. All right, so that's kind of some aspects. Actually, by the way, you also see this in our current society, where people have a very hard time escaping society because they're sedentary, because we're dependent, and because it's like all one cage, right? And so it's just all like a world. It's not literally a world's government, but it feels like a world's government. It's more like country. Like basically, the whole world is full of governments, and they all do their own things. They have military, standing armies. So it feels like that. Feels like you can't find some other place where you can actually, um, yeah, like where you can actually do things like more creatively and try to come up with a better way of doing things. That's relates to the generational problem. The generational problem is the problem that the current generations have all their different investments that they're invested in, and they don't want to give those up. Um, so yeah, so going into the same framework, but like a better version of it, you'd have the freedom. So the freedom I changed it. I call it self-control. So if you could get it to be more of a self-control rather than freedom, right? Because you're minimizing it. So because you're minimizing that freedom, it's more of a self-control. It's just survival. You could also just call it survival. Just minimalism, simplifying the lifestyle to that, down to minimalism and lots of self-control. Then you have, and conscientiousness. Then you have the justice aspect. So the justice aspect is all about equality, and there's also a lot of checks and balances. And this is decentralized. The older system is the current system is very centralized. This newer version would be much more decentralized. Then you have the balance aspect. So like I was saying, this balance, you want it to be recycling. So the better system would be a recycling type of balance. You'd also have, again, that decentralization, meaning there's a lot more equality. And again, those checks and balances, again, make it much more equal and much more balanced. Then you have the mental aspect. So you'd want the education. And by the way, a big part of mental is like the communication. So, right, it's like the mental universe, and you're trying to have your mental universe as similar to the real universe to try and understand it. Well, it's the same with people. So the current system is really, really bad with the mental. It's like completely, there's so many barriers. There's the language barrier. There's the, literacy barrier where like a lot of people, are on different literacy levels of like communication in terms of vocabulary. There's also patience. So sometimes it's just like patience. There's a lack of patience. Right? It goes back to the materialism. So yeah. So in this better version, you'd have intellectualism instead of materialism. So people would appreciate like wisdom and ideas and thoughts, and they'd also appreciate communication a lot more. They'd appreciate understanding between each other and of the universe and of nature. Also communication with nature, observation and patience, and because understanding includes observation and patience and listening. So that would all be also not just for society, not just for the universe. Well, so also, yes, for the universe, that includes nature, the ecosystem. So yeah, and then the physical aspect would be independence. Now, of course, we would still be social. We would still be social like animals. We'd still be social society, but the difference is that because we've been social animals for like 300,000 years now, even more than that. We were probably social animals because Homo sapiens have been existing for 300,000 years, but even our ancestors were also social animals, and our ancestors go back to even like 7 million years ago. Now, were they as social 7 million years ago? Maybe not, probably not, but there's like if you look at chimpanzees or bonobos, who are our closest relatives, they are very social compared to like some other animals. So even there, they would not like to live alone, and they're even less social than us, arguably. So if you look at humans, like I'm not saying that just because we're independent, we would not be social. It's just that we would be more generalized in our skill set, and and we would have less of a fear of like having to survive on our own for a while, and then we just eventually get back into finding some other group that we can join. And then there's also the nomadic aspect. So instead of super sedentary, there'd be a little more of a nomadic lifestyle. This way, there's it's this way. Yeah, this way. Basically, the main benefit of that is that number one, societies have less of a chance to like grow bigger, right? Because if you look at history, societies started growing bigger once as they started becoming sedentary, because then it was hard for the societies to run away from each other, right? So once as they started being sedentary, it was easy for them to get gobbled up by the amoeba. And so then you get a bigger and bigger and bigger amoeba. It's like a snowball effect when they were sedentary. Before that, they were nomadic, and it was much harder to do that. So that's one benefit of the nomadic lifestyle. And of course, there's other good aspects, like it's more, it's like more resilient to, for instance, climate. So changes in climate, it's more resilient to that because you can just move up and down the like away or closer to the equator. And then you also have the benefits of, for instance, the the independence, so that people are more capable. They're more, the problem is it's easier to manipulate people when they're dependent on you and when they're specialized. When people are more independent and more generalized in both their capability, their physical and their mental capabilities, then it's much harder to manipulate them. But anyway, guys, I think, those are the two different systems. Again, they were both from the framework of the balance versus change, and the 5 different aspects of that framework. So again, you can see like how the balance and the change happen in the two. One of them is much more high energy, and one of them is much more lower energy. One's more self-controlled, the other one's less controlled. It just gets to do what it wants to do. So yeah. Anyway, so I hope you guys like the video, and I make lots more videos like this. So if you want to see them, you can go check them out. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.